Hello, everybody. Hello. It's me, Shannon LaBruyere. I am live and loving it. Tonight, it is Sunday, September 8th, 2019. Welcome to Sunday Night Live, where we talk about all the different ways that we can thrive in change. Carol, so glad you jumped on. Yay! Daniel, glad you're here. Awesome. Good to see you. Man, I am so excited to be back. It feels like I've been gone for months. It's only been 2 weeks, but I missed you guys last week. I'm glad that you are all back. Dan, I'm glad you're here. First time ever. Ooh, good. Carol says she got home in time to tune in live, which I love, and wishes me a happy Grandma Day. Amen to that. For all the grandparents out there, there is nothing better. Ken, glad you're here. I know you're enjoying being a grandparent since we do that together. It's one of the things that we're discovering as we get older, just how joyous it is to be able to pour into children that you get to send home to their parents when you're done. So we like to spoil our grandbabies. It's a blast. So thank you, Carol. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Tonight we're going to talk about change, and we're going to talk about specifically 4 phases of change. So much is unexpected when changes happen. Sometimes the changes come as a big surprise. Sometimes we feel like we're totally taken off guard. We feel like we're, in an ocean and a wave just came up and knocked us over. That's happened to me, and it's so scary. Change can be like that. But when we know there's a change, or when we're in the midst of a change, there are some things that we can predict, and it's going to help us all. So Michelle, I'm glad you're here. Brian, welcome. So glad you're here. We're getting ready to get started talking about the 4 phases of change. Before we get too deep into it, though, I want to invite you, if you haven't done it already, I invite you to go and subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find it on YouTube by typing in my name, and I'm the only Shannon LaBruyere with a Thrive and Change channel, so you'll have no trouble finding me. Hit subscribe, and you'll be able to get notified anytime a new video is uploaded, but you'll also be able to access all of the archives of Thrive and Change of Sunday Night Live, so I hope you do that. Enjoy, and let's get started talking about change. Okay, so if you have your notebooks ready, there are 4 phases of change that we're going to talk about. Let me just say, if you were to go and check out of the library or go and Google it, there are so many different books and articles and opinions about the path of change, about the phases of change, about the different categories. All of that is good. None of it's set in stone, right? Because we're all people, so people vary and we come at things different ways. So what I'm getting ready to share with you isn't the only way to look at change, but it is a way to look at change, and I find it to be very, very helpful. So these are the 4 phases of change. Number 1 is denial. Hi, Chris, I'm glad you're here. First phase of change we're going to talk about is denial. Then comes resistance. Then comes acceptance. And then finally, there's transformation. So this is the path that change takes, generally speaking, no matter what the change is. First stage is denial, then we have resistance, then we have acceptance, and then we have transformation. So we're back to school now, and Richard and Roseanne, I'm so glad you popped in. We're back to school now, and even though I don't have children that go back to school in the fall anymore, we're empty nesters at my house, I still am so programmed into the rhythms of fall. How many of you are that way? How many of you, even though you don't have kids to take back to school, or you don't go back to school yourself, when the air gets a little crisp and we see Labor Day approaching on the calendar, we start getting that go back to school feeling. It's just part of the natural rhythm of life. And for so long, it was a key part of my life that I learned to expect it every year. I knew what was going to happen. And even though I knew a change was coming, I knew that summer was ending, and fall was coming on. I knew that there were other people that were going through the same thing as I was. We were getting our kids ready for school, going back. All of those things were so common. They happened to me year after year after year. And still, I found myself in denial about the change that was coming. Hey, Bermuda Bob, I'm glad you're here. I was in denial. No matter how many years my kids went back to school in September, no matter how many years I did it, I found myself in denial that they were going to have to go back to school. This is why that was such a big change for me. First of all, I worked outside of the home and I worked full-time. So I had 40 hours a week that I was in somebody else's building doing somebody else's mission, right? Then I had a long commute and I had kids who were in elementary school, middle school, and high school at the same time. So summer was so awesome because everything was laid back. How many of you hear me? There were no schedules. I mean, we could kind of do what we wanted. It was so much easier to control. But once fall hit, bam, there was going to be a big change. And every year that change looked a little different. And I would put it off. How many of you know what I'm talking about? You know a change is coming and you're like, we've got our fingers in our ears and we are humming loudly. Stage one, the first stage of change is called denial. We just don't want to admit that's happening. Kids going back to school is a really common change, but also in the scheme of things, not such a traumatic one, right? I mean, it's all good. People are healthy. There are other changes in our lives. Things like huge changes to our health. Maybe there's a death of a loved one. These are things that are also changes. And you might see some correlation between the phases of change and the stages of grief. But they're not exactly the same. But big changes, almost always, we're in denial. We don't want them to happen. We wish they weren't going to happen. And we distract ourselves. If you are leading a team, that you are wanting to make a change in your workplace, a change at your school, a change in the group that you lead, and I love those hearts. Mwah, thank you. When you're making changes for other people, understand that if you're the one making the change, you had plenty of time to get used to it. You had to think it through. You made decisions. You may have even gotten input from people. You are through the denial phase, but the people that you're trying to lead may not be. It's important to know for ourselves and for the people we lead that the first phase of a change is often denial. And if we know that the people that we're dealing with are going to go through that phase, so much easier to help them through it. By talking, by listening, by giving facts, by answering questions, by keeping it in front of people, right? Let's see. Ooh, Hunter says, this is the first time ever in 8 years I did not want to go back to work. Change is tough. I'll bet, Hunter, and I don't know all the details right off, but I'll bet that there were changes at work that you weren't sure exactly what to expect, or you had an idea that they weren't going to be something that you loved. Julie, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, change is tough, and it gets tougher if we don't understand how it works. Phase one is denial. The people that we're trying to influence or ourselves, we go in denial. I hear you, Hunter. All right, the second phase is resistance. Okay, so I'm doing it, but I don't want to. You're making me do it. You know, the authorities would have come and talked to me at the very least if I refused to send my children to school in the fall because I was in denial that it was going to happen. Just because I was still out there wearing my flip-flops in, 35-degree weather, putting the kids on the bus, trying to pretend it wasn't real, didn't change it. I was still putting them on the bus, but I was resistant. I didn't want to do it. A lot of times, part of the change when I was sending my kids back to school involved a different routine for how I got home. I sometimes had to stop and pick a child up from school, or I had to go by this babysitter or the caregiver's house. And so my routine was turned upside down, and I dreaded it and I hated it. When we're going through change, it's important to understand that we are not just going to have a phase of denial where we don't want to do it or where we just don't even believe it has to happen, but we're also probably going to experience this resistance. And Mary, I'm so glad you're here. I hope your ankle is getting better. I've been praying for you. Mary was with me at Horses Heal Hearts. We did some volunteer work there, and she ended up turning her ankle. So I hope you're taking good care of it. Hunter says, yeah, I have to do it, but I don't want to. That's the resistance phase, right? We're resisting the change, but we know we have to. For whatever reason, I gotta go. I've got to do it. I've got to make the money. I've got to stay out of jail. I don't want to change jobs. Whatever the reason for the change is, we can resist it, but we go along with it. Knowing that that's a part of the process, don't panic. Just because you're feeling that way doesn't mean that there's something wrong or that you're being obstinate. It's a natural part of the process. First, we're in denial about it, then the resistance starts. I don't want to do it. Or we start looking for all of the negative things to reinforce our resentment for the change, right? Dawn, hi, I'm glad you're here. And Paul, welcome aboard. Yeah, this resistance that says, I don't want to do it and I'm only going to do it because I have to, and I'm mad about it. And so I start to make up or look for, I shouldn't say make up, I start to really hone in on the reasons why I don't like it. That's 100% valid. A lot of times there are things about it that we don't like. But what have I always said? Where our focus goes, our energy flows, right? Where our focus goes, our energy flows. So if we're in the midst of a change and we are sensing that resistance, and Hunter, I'm so glad you're here and I'm glad you're being honest and saying, I am struggling with this. Yes, those negative things are very real. They're often real, but we feed them when we focus on them. There are other things that are good. There always are. There are always two sides. Something good, something not so good. We get to choose where we put our energy. What are we going to feed? Where our focus goes, our energy flows. So if you or a team that you're leading is going through a change and hitting resistance, we're doing it because we have to, but we don't want to, a way that you can help with that is personally make the decision to choose where is the good thing. It doesn't have to be a million things. Find a good thing and start focusing on that. This is good. This is good for me. This is good for the people I help. This is good for the people I serve. There is always an upside. Always an upside. I love to tell the story of Corrie ten Boom. She and her sister Betsy were prisoners of war in Holland during World War II. And they were in a barracks that was filled with fleas. Filled with fleas. It was so infested with fleas. They're in a prison camp. They're starving. They're being abused. They're serving hard labor. And when they go back to their shelter, it is infested with fleas. And Corrie tells the story in her book, The Hiding Place, of complaining about it to her sister Betsy. And her sister Betsy said, I am going to thank God for the fleas. And Corrie was adamant. Oh, no, no, no. I am not thanking God for the fleas. I draw the line, she said. I draw the line. I can thank him for a lot of stuff, but I am not thanking him for those fleas. What they didn't know was that those fleas kept the guards away from their barracks. And so when they went back after their hard day at labor, they got to be uninterrupted. Corrie and her sister Betsy were Christians. They got to have Bible studies with the other people in their barracks. They got to pray with people who needed it in the barracks. They got to share and they got to laugh and they got to connect with people in a way they would have never been able to do if it hadn't have been for those fleas. So even when things look bad, there is an upside and you can find it if you look. That's what we have to do when we're in resistance phase. It doesn't help to tell our teams, look for the good side if they're resisting change, but we can ask them questions and encourage them to find it. And if you are having trouble finding it, I encourage you, talk to somebody who you're close to, who you know has a positive outlook, who has the right kind of a mindset, and say, help me to see this. A coach does that. That's what I do for many of my clients. Let's walk through this change that you're going through, and let's see what are the good things that you can start to focus on, because they're always there, I promise. And if you can't see them by yourself, don't beat yourself up. Ask somebody to help you, right? Including you, Hunter. I will help you see the better. I will help you. All right. The next phase is called acceptance. So that's when we're done making excuses about why we have to continue to hate it. We start to maybe see, this might not be so bad after all. And we start to just let it become part of our routine. I accept it. Don't have a lot of choice. Might as well. But this is the key place where we stop focusing on what we lost. That's another key piece from getting from that resistance piece to getting to the acceptance piece, is stop focusing on what you lost. Stop focus on what you don't have anymore. It's that principle, respect the now, that I talk about when I go through my four principles of support life. Respect the now. It is what it is. That is gone. And even though that's sad, when we acknowledge it, we can be sad. We can grieve it. And then we can let it go. But we have to get from that resistance phase to the acceptance phase, we start saying, oh, this is what I've gained, not this is what I've lost. If you are keeping a running total of all of the things that you've lost over the course of your life, I am encouraging you, stop now. Stop keeping the running total of what you've lost, where it's fallen short. Stop keeping the running list of the disappointments, because where our focus goes, our energy flows. I encourage you, let that list go, fold it up, throw it in the trash. It's yesterday. There's something good to be gained in the now, and it's part of that acceptance phase of the change. If we are able to do that ourselves, we will be more able to help our teams and the people that we are leading through change do the same thing. As your team, as your group starts shifting from, we used to have it so good, and they start seeing, well, you know what, at least we've got better vending machines. And I use that example. Because I was one of the key people that helped take 7 plants, consolidate them into one. We took about 1,600 people who were spread out in 7 buildings, and we took them and all of their processes and put them in a huge new processing plant out in Pontiac. And I'm telling you, people hated it. They had so many complaints, but one thing they loved was there were so many vending machines. There was at least an upside for some of them, right? There was at least an upside. We can find that, and they can find that too. And it is a choice. It is 100% a choice. We find the thing and we say, I'm going to focus on what I've got now and what's good, and I'm going to let it go. And we choose to let it go. We release it and we grieve it. And then it's in the past. That grieving process is important. Maybe we'll talk about that on another Sunday Night Live. All right, so denial. Then we go through resistance. Then we go through acceptance, because I have to. And then we're focusing more on the things that we're gaining, not just the things that we've lost. And then the final phase is called transformation. That's the change. It's happened. Sometimes it happens that fast. Other times it is a slow process, but that transformation phase is where the new way is now the old way. We've been doing it long enough that this feels like this is how my life is. This feels like this is how things are supposed to be. This is my new normal. Sadly and regrettably, that transformation phase, once we're there, it becomes the old way the next time we have to make a change. We are constantly in the process of exchanging one set of circumstances for another, and for another, and for another. So the change that we hated, didn't want, that we denied, that we resisted, that we ultimately accepted, and now we're in the midst of it and we're doing what we can to make that piece of our life better, now becomes the thing when we're asked to give it up. When we're asked to give it up, we go into denial. It is the phase. So the best place to be is in the transformation piece, right? It's like, yes, I'm rocking this. This is really good. It feels great to be in the transformation phase. But we have to beware that some of the other people that we are dealing with don't understand where they're at in this process. And if we can tune in to where they're at in the midst of their change and be able to help them, to be able to coach them, to ask them questions, to help them explore, what good thing can you find? What good thing can you find? What are you going to focus on while you're here that you can make better? What are you going to do to make this change be something that adds to you and doesn't subtract to you in the scheme of things? I love this phrase, and if you can embrace this and take it to heart and tuck it in, I want you to do it. This is what it is. Things don't happen to you. They happen for you. This is one of my core beliefs. I believe that God has created each of us for a purpose and a reason. And that the circumstances and things that look like they're happening to me in life, and they may even look like attacks, they are not happening to me. They are happening for me. They are not happening to you. They are happening for you. There is good that you will gain that you couldn't have gained any other way without that change. That's my core belief. That's why I'm so passionate about helping people thrive in the midst of change. Because I know that those transformations, those changes that we make in ourselves, even the ones that we didn't ask for, but they're thrust on us, those changes ultimately will make us better. They will make us stronger, but we have to choose it. We have to be open to it. We have to believe that it's possible. Sherry, I'm glad you're here. Sherry, I'm glad you're here. I'm loving that these people are popping on. Thank you so much. So this is how change goes. Those four phases are common when any kind of a change is happening. So when you're going through a big change in your life, you just might want to sit down and look at what phase of that change are you in? Are you in the denial phase? Because if you reflect and realize, you know what, I'm in denial. You can, if you recognize it, once, what is it called? Awareness. Choice is a function of awareness. That's what I want. Choice is a function of awareness. Once you become aware that you are in a certain phase and you're not moving, once you're aware that you're there, you can choose to get out of it. Beautiful, beautiful thing, because we have the power to choose. So when we are looking at those four phases, we can choose to make a change so that we get to the next step, and we can keep getting to the next step, and we can choose to help the people we lead do the same thing. So this is what I want to leave you with. If every change, small or large, has that kind of a cycle, the denial, the resistance, the acceptance, and then finally the transformation, it behooves us to get as many of those phases out of the way before the rubber has to hit the road. Okay? So, in my case, I used the story at the beginning of how I would resist the kids going back to school, and I'd put it off, and I would not think about it, and I didn't want to make plans, and I would wait to the last minute to go get lunch stuff. You name it, I was in denial. After a while, I figured out if I can get past the denial part sooner, I'm going to be able to actually jump in and have a productive first day of school, if I can get through the denial phase before school actually starts. In the case of the big plant move that we were making, we spent 18 months preparing 1,600 people to move through the denial phase. Yep, we are actually consolidating and you're going to have to move. We had to move through the resistance phase, this whole mindset of, I don't want to do anything different and I don't want to do it in a different place. We moved through that by having open houses in the building before it was ever open, by having them practice starting at the front door and walking back to where their new machine was located before there was ever any processing happening in the plant. We spent so much time helping people move through the denial, move through the resistance, move into the acceptance phase. And then when it was time to close the doors on those 7 plants and have everybody come into that one big plant in Pontiac, most of them had already moved through denial, resistance, and acceptance. And they were now ready to start not focusing on what they lost, but focus on what they could get and what they had. There were other plants that had to be consolidated across the nation that didn't begin that process until the day everybody walked in the door. Can you imagine what a toll that would take on your team if you had a change coming? Some of you, I know who watch this, some of you are getting ready to move from one location in your town to another. Your whole company is picking up shop, you're taking all your desks, and you're moving to a new location down the road. If you are a leader in that organization, I encourage you, start that process well before everybody has to show up and start being productive on day one and serving customers. Help people move through that transition and get it out of the way before they actually have to start serving customers. If it's you and you're the one, move yourself through those phases before you actually have to take the kids back to school and interrupt your fun summer days and reroute your commute and find the new caregiver. Take a look at those phases and say, what can I do to get out of denial sooner? And then start working with that resistant piece, helping myself understand I've got some options, and then getting to that acceptance phase so that you can be more productive more quickly. Nina, I'm so glad you're here. These are the 4 phases again: denial, resistance, acceptance, and then transformation. If we know that we're going to go through those phases for ourselves and we become aware where we're at in that process, then we have the ability to choose to move forward into the next phase. And if we're leading a team and we see people who are in different areas of those phases and they're stuck, we as leaders have I don't want to say we have an obligation, but the heart of a leader says, I want to help. I want to help you move through those changes. And we can go and work with the individuals or work with those groups and say, let's talk about this. The change happened. That building is burned down. We're in a new one. So how can we make this home? What can you do that's going to make this more homey for you? How are you going to be able to structure your day so that you're going to be able to get what you need done? Asking those questions and empowering people to actually give the answers. It's a wonderful thing. And you have the power to do it now that you know. Choice is a function of awareness. Now that you're aware of those 4 phases, you can choose to help people move through them. Johanna, I am so glad you're here. I was just thinking about you the other day, so welcome. We're wrapping up, but before I go, what are your thoughts? Where do you see yourself having the most challenge when it comes in those 4 phases? Is it harder for you to just acknowledge, yeah, a change has to be made. I am not going to be able to do this anymore? Is that where you get stuck? Or do you get stuck in that resistance phase where you say, you know what? This is horrible. I hate this place. This drive is terrible. I don't like what I have to wear. Blah, blah, blah. Where do you get stuck in the change cycle? Once you're aware of it, you can choose to move through it. That's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for jumping on. I've missed you. I'm so glad you're here. For those of you who are hanging on to the end here, I want to invite you, if you have not considered it, we have 6 days until the launch of the next mastermind group. It's called Perfectly Imperfect Leadership. Perfectly Imperfect Leadership. And if you beat yourself up for making mistakes, if you don't even know why you keep making so many mistakes, if you are not perfect, and Lord knows I am not, this mastermind is for you. We have got a great core group of people, and I would love for you to join in. It costs $25. It's 3 weeks, Saturday mornings on Facebook Live, and it goes from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. All of them are recorded. If you think that you would like to take a step forward in your leadership, if you're that imperfect leader that doesn't want to be perfect but wants to get better, this is exactly the group for you. Just drop in the comments that you're interested, and I will send you all the info you need. For those of you who are going to watch the repost, thank you. Thank you all for being here. God bless you. Mwah! I love you. Have a great night and thrive this week.